All memory is fiction. This is a point that Ian Reid, the author of I'm Thinking of Ending Things, drives home in his novel, and it's certainly an idea that Kaufman shows in the movie. But let's think about this for a second. Think of a memory, any memory, the people, the colors, what happened, where you were, what you were doing. You might be like me. My memories are amorphous, almost dreamlike, influenced by the emotions I felt at the time and the emotions I feel now. I only really remember selective things in each memory, and I'm not too sure that those things are even true. Have you ever thought that you remembered something clearly, only for someone else to recall the exact same thing in a much different way? Think about this during this video. If you came here because you're confused as to what the heck was going on in this movie, then here's the time code to the spoiler-filled analysis. Up until then, I will keep it spoiler-free and give some background on the film as well as my review. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is the latest film from Hollywood's designated brain puzzler, head-scratching, big-thinking writer-director Charlie Kaufman. He's best known for the films that he wrote but didn't direct, those being Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Being John Malkovich, and Adaptation. With Adaptation, he cemented himself as a legend in my eyes. Not only is the film outstanding, but he used it to troll the Academy. You see, the story of Adaptation is that Charlie Kaufman and his brother Donald are writing the script to the movie Adaptation. So naturally, both Charlie and Donald were credited as screenwriters, and so both were nominated for the Academy Award for Best Adapted Screenplay. But Donald Kaufman doesn't exist. That's right, Charlie Kaufman tricked the Academy into nominating a fictional person. Considering the top-notch qualities of his screenplays, it made sense for Kaufman to transition to directing. He made a big splash with his debut mind-bending feature, Synecdoche, New York, but his follow-up, Anomalisa, opened to better critical reviews, but I think hasn't aged as well. For a particular scene, I prefer Team America World Police. I'm not going to get into any sort of details, but if you know, you know. So that finally brings us to I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is an adaptation of the book with the same name. The book and the movie are very similar until they aren't, but we all knew that Kaufman was going to do his own thing anyways. So, without spoiling either, if you want to read the book before or after you watch the film, I don't think it really matters because they're different enough to the point where they're different experiences, which I like. Me personally, I prefer the movie, but that's just my preference. A reason I prefer the movie is, forgive me if I'm saying this incorrectly, Lukáš Zal's stunning cinematography, but that's a redundant statement. Everything this man shoots is stunning and beautiful. Just take a look at Ida and Cold War, two of the most visually impressive films of the last decade. This is coming from me, who's usually a film purist, but this guy is able to make digital images look absolutely gorgeous, and he does so in this movie as well. He's particularly good with framing within the 1.33:1 aspect ratio. This ratio helps the film focus on singular characters and faces. It makes the film feel a little bit more claustrophobic, and it allows intercutting during the driving sequences. If you haven't seen the movie, just be prepared for the fact that a lot of this film is inside their car. But these scenes aren't boring. The actors are charismatic and do a very good job in expressing the complexities of their characters. The windshield wipers provide a nice rhythm to the dialogue, and that aural rhythm complements the visual rhythm of the editing, driving the scenes forward at a nice pace. I've heard some people criticize these dialogues, these discussions, as pretentious. I understand the viewpoint, but I don't agree with it. What the film really has going for it is the tense and surreal atmosphere that just oozes off the screen. From the awkward family dinner to the nighttime drive through the snow, there's always a sense of unease, of existential dread. So if you're a fan of dialogue-heavy films that really get the noggin jogging, you might like this movie. I loved it, which is why I'm doing a video on it, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. So if you don't like it, don't blame it on me. If you do plan on seeing the movie, I highly advise that you watch two films first. A Woman Under the Influence by John Cassavetes and A Beautiful Mind by Ron Howard. This film is rife with cinematic and literary references which factor heavily into the movie, but you should be good if you've seen those two films. Okay, now on to the fun part. Spoilers from here on out. Are they gone? Okay, the only ones who are still here are those who've seen the movie, so now we can talk freely. What the f*** is this film? I guess there's only one way to approach this, and that's one step at a time. The Kino corner is calling me. Don't worry about it. First off, it's quite obvious that the janitor is Jake. Kaufman foreshadows this revelation in the movie much more than Reid does in the novel. He cuts between the main story and the janitor, showing the janitor in Jake's home, an apartment in the town, in his truck, and at the school. In the book, the story of Jake and the young woman is written by the janitor, which means that the book is found text, or whatever you might call the literary version of found footage. And it's made pretty obvious, too, that Jake is the janitor's self-insert. In the film, the story of Jake the janitor and Jake the young man take place simultaneously. It's like he's imagining this story in his head while he's mindlessly cleaning the school. But what happens at the school does influence his fantasy, such as the rehearsing of Oklahoma and the Zemeckis movie playing on the television. So, is Jake his younger self? His ideal self? He says that youth is admirable, the youth are healthier, more attractive and hopeful. But it's not like he imagines himself as an 18-year-old. Jesse Plemons, the actor, is 32, which is an age that's in between young adulthood and just adulthood. He imagines himself at that turning point in his life, right on the line between the years of growing health and years of decline. But also, could this be the age at which he met this mysterious young woman? It's not uncommon to look back at specific points in your life and wonder if things would have turned out differently had you done something or didn't do something. In this case, the janitor wonders if he could have evaded a lifetime of loneliness had he asked for this woman's number. If he had gotten her number, perhaps his life would have turned out better. But would it? Could this woman be the solution to all of his problems? No. At best, she would be a band-aid, but even in his own fantasy, he doesn't get her. The film starts with her thinking of ending things. She likes him enough, but she just doesn't see herself as wanting to commit to him. Later on in the film, her story about how they met changes. By her account, he was no longer the awkward but affable trivia player, but a creepy guy at the bar who wouldn't stop staring at her. Hell, he can hardly kiss her in this fantasy. What's this about? Is his self-esteem so low that he won't even let himself win in his own fantasies? I think so. And I think it boils down to 4 things. His age, his looks, his job, and his mental illness. He sees himself as ugly and not worthy of anyone's attention. We're led to believe that he's a brilliant man, or at least a very hardworking man who has a degree in physics or something. Yet he works as a school janitor, a job that requires you to work around hundreds if not thousands of people while remaining invisible. Nobody wants to pay attention to the janitor. Nobody has wanted to pay attention to him. So pair that with the fact that he sees himself as ugly and past his prime, it makes sense that he doesn't see himself as worthy of this fantasy. Kaufman makes this sentiment quite clear during the dancing scene. 2 more conventionally attractive people replace Jake and the young woman. They lovingly dance through the high school hallways, with their dance culminating in their marriage, but a dancing version of the janitor invades their marriage. He is a monster in this dance. He attacks the young woman and kills the younger Jake, leaving him to die in the gym. At that point, the real Jake and the young woman look at each other and part ways. He can never have her, could never have her. But what really crippled him throughout his life was his mental illness. All the signs in the film point to schizophrenia. The 2 films discussed within the movie, A Woman Under the Influence and A Beautiful Mind, are both films centered around schizophrenics. Jake, in particular, empathized a lot with Mabel in A Woman Under the Influence. And what he took away from that film was that people should be kinder to people like Mabel, people like him. The other big sign is his mother's tinnitus, or tinnitus, or however you want to say it. But what she describes doesn't sound like tinnitus. She says she hears whispers constantly, like the universe is trying to communicate with her. Later in the film, Jake and the young woman argue whether or not children inherit mental illnesses from their mothers, suggesting that schizophrenia runs in their family. But the big question that's on everyone's minds is, who is the young woman? What's her name? Lucy, Louisa, Yvonne, Amy? Does she even have a name? Does she even exist? Well, according to her, or according to Jake through her, a thought is the most real thing that can exist. It's more real than words or actions because you can't fake a thought. So she is real, not in a corporeal sense, but in an emotional or fantastical sense. She's not only his feminine ideal or the girl that got away. She's a collection of media he has consumed, people he has met, and a bit of himself as well. She paints the paintings of Ralph Albert Blakelock. She writes the poems of Ava H.D. She becomes Pauline Kael and gives her scathing New Yorker review of A Woman Under the Influence. She thinks this all comes from her, but we know it doesn't. Her studies also change throughout the movie. At first she's studying rabies, and then she's a poet, and then she's in quantum physics, then a painter, then a person studying aging. Maybe her ever-changing disciplines paralleled Jake's academic career. He was a man torn between science and art. Maybe his heart was more in art, but he wasn't as good as he would have liked to be. He couldn't paint as well as Blakelock. He couldn't write quite as well as David Foster Wallace. He was better at physics, perhaps. Perhaps he was brilliant at it, but that pursuit left him unfulfilled. We don't quite know, but I feel like this might be the case. So, if a lot of himself is in her, while she's also operating as her own person within this fantasy, it makes sense that he can read her thoughts. Every writer knows the thoughts of their characters. It also gives her thought of "I'm thinking of ending things" a double meaning. She wants to break up with him and, in a sense, he wants to break up with himself. But not before visiting his parents. What's the purpose of this? Is he trying to process his family life before he departs from this world? Does he think that remembering the farm will bring back good memories, memories that will give him a newfound will to live? I don't really think that's the case. I think that this is his way of saying goodbye to his entire life, and also regretting the life that he didn't live. The first thing we see at the farm, other than his mom waving awkwardly, are a few dead lambs, frozen at the barn door. Jake then recounts a story of maggots that were eating his pigs alive, forcing his dad to kill them out of mercy. Jake is being eaten alive too, not by maggots, but by his own inner demons. His parents are cold to him, but warm to the young woman. He's anxious, almost scared to see his own parents, and when he does, he hardly talks to them. It's as if he becomes a background character during these scenes in the house, and the young woman sort of takes his place, allowing him to see himself from the outside in a weird kind of way. But in line with what we see in the barn, we also witness death in the house, the slow decay of age. His parents losing their ability to walk, eat, or remember things. Those painful, long deaths. And he's alongside them the whole way, unable to stop the inevitable. The house, in my view, is both an amalgamation of his memories and his mind. His mother encourages the young woman to venture into the basement, a place Jake forbids her to go. It's in the basement, the guarded inner sanctum of his mind, that she discovers the truth about him as well as the truth about herself, because the subconscious cannot hide thoughts. And thoughts are more real than anything. And once a thought enters your mind, you can't let it go. Once he reveals his true self to the young woman, she can't help but rebel. But is she rebelling? Does she have any agency? Or is he self-destructing his own fantasy of having a girlfriend after facing himself?
Suicide becomes the story, the mythology, the cautionary tale. It's obnoxious.
So in the end, after he takes off his clothes and follows the pig and then sings a song from Oklahoma, does he die? My guess is yes, despite hearing the sounds of the engine after the credits. I see it as him going out on his own terms rather than slowly decaying. After all, he's not like his parents. He doesn't have anyone to take care of him. We can pick apart this film all day, and I'll actually be streaming with Mark After Dark later to go way more in depth on the film. Wait a second. I gotta take this. Hello? Kino speaking.
There is only one question, and only one more question to answer. Who is the caller? The man who constantly calls her, but appears to be her. The book reveals that the caller is the janitor. So what's the purpose of him calling the young woman? Does he want the fantasy to self-actualize? What is the one question? Whether or not to go on living? Perhaps it's the young woman's mission to answer this enigmatic question. We may not exactly know the question, but this question is the reason for her existence.
Anyways, I think though that the most important thing to take away from this movie is how it makes you feel. These desolate, snowy roads, death abundant on the farm, the empty halls of the school, the growing darkness. If there's one shot that I think sums up the whole movie, it's the shot of the car in the grass. The snow is falling on the car, and the car alone. It's a film about true loneliness, our desperate need for companionship, and the fear of aging and dying. But as they say, we all die alone. Forget the documentary. This is the real The Feel When No GF movie this year.